I'm excited to be here at DjangoCon again in person after a few years hiatus, and I'm excited to give this talk. I enjoy myself working on legacy code, and I have this impression that a lot of other people are more scared of it than I am. So I'm hopeful that I can give some clues and ways to make working with older and legacy code bases a little more enjoyable. I guess about 6 weeks ago, I happened to see a video embedded in a tweet that I found to be interesting and indicative of how I think a lot of people view legacy code. So I'm going to play that first and see if this resonates. Is that what you think of when you think of working with legacy code? This was a tweet by, let's see if I can get this to go to the next page without restarting the video. Oops. Come on. This was a tweet by Adi Osmani, who I don't actually know, but I think he works at Google. And the tweet said, "Be careful with legacy code." And there's a link there, and the slides will be posted if you want to look and see what kind of engagement it got. It got a lot of engagement. I was intrigued and happy to see that a lot of things that I had thought that I would include in this talk were mentioned in the feedback to that talk, to that tweet. So I thought that was interesting. So to get into what I'm going to talk about, I'll start describing what I mean by legacy code, what is a legacy code base and characteristics, and why they're often feared by people. Often when you're working with a legacy code base, you start to hear a siren call of, we should just start over and build from scratch. And I'll talk a little bit about how to make that decision as to whether to continue to invest in a code base that is causing some problems versus starting all over. But for the most part, I'd like to focus on how to nurture the code base that you have. And I break that into 3 sections. The prerequisites that I think you absolutely positively have to do if you're going to nurture a code base. Some easy wins to freshen a code base and on the surface make it less scary. And finally, go a little bit deeper and talk more about the mindset and the culture of yourself or the whole team that's working on a legacy code base to try and make it less of a mysterious thing for developers to work on. When I thought about what an image of a legacy code base might be, this is the kind of thing that came to mind. And I look at this page and I'm like, I can't read that. That's indecipherable. And I feel like that's often, it's probably overstating what a legacy code base, how indecipherable it is, but it's got that kind of sense of, I don't even understand this. At the same time, though, there's beauty in that picture. There's some beautiful elements, and I feel like oftentimes there's beauty and strength in a legacy code base that may be a bit under-recognized. So to switch back to words, what I mean by a legacy code base is it's code with a history, and I put in there a dark history. And by that I mean dim, not necessarily evil. It's like it's an unremembered history, and that makes everything a little bit fuzzy. There's a phase a project goes through in its early stages where it's being built, and things are getting added quickly, and probably more than one person is working on it, and maybe you have a whole team, including a project manager and testing, and everyone has in their head like what this thing is doing. And very quickly you can make decisions and make architectural decisions 1 week and start working with them and come to realize maybe that wasn't the right way to go. And because everyone has it in their head what this thing is and what all the impacts are, you can change that architectural decision in the building phase and be confident that you've fixed all the problems that change caused. A legacy code base is not in that phase. No one has it in their head what all the architectural decisions were and what are the impacts of changing them. Oftentimes, the current developers working on a legacy code base didn't work on building it, or if they did, it was so long ago that they don't remember what they were thinking when they were making decisions. So there's a lack of familiarity with the code base. There's a lack of knowing what it's supposed to do or why it behaves the way it is currently behaving. Depending on how old it is, it may also follow outmoded conventions. Coding practices change over time remarkably quickly. And if something was written several years ago, it may have been written before some new features of the language or some new features of the framework existed. So it may be doing things in ways that look really odd today, and that reason for that may not be understood by people who are newer to the code base and perhaps aren't even aware of the restrictions that existed in the past when this was being built. And finally, usually a legacy code base is running in production. If it wasn't running in production, it would probably be called a dead code base. And just the fact that it's running in production, either as a project that you're supporting or as a package that is being built up into other people's code, that just amps up the danger factor and the scariness of making a change that might break something. So all of that combines, the unfamiliarity and the danger combined to make it a little bit difficult to work with legacy code. And this is an image I came up with to sort of represent what it feels like maybe to work on legacy code. There's an old building there, and there may be some beauty in its underlying structure, but working on it and the scaffolding around it, it's difficult, and it's maybe hard to understand exactly what's going on. So it can be kind of daunting to work on a legacy code base. And then you're often faced with, well, should we continue to invest in this, or maybe we just start over and build from scratch, and it would be prettier and easier. So before I get into nurturing, I want to talk a little bit about what you might want to consider if you're making that decision. And the first thing, I think, is you need to evaluate whether or not the current code base that you have is meeting the needs of whoever's paying for it, whether that be a client or yourself. Over time, the needs and desires of a client can change over time, and if your code base hasn't kept up, then it may be that it has diverged rather a lot from what the client wants it to do. And if that's the case, you may be heading in the right direction if you look at a rebuild. But if it's pretty much doing what they want, you might want to think about sticking with what you have and nurturing it versus starting over. A second thing to consider is how much of a problem this code base is causing in production today. Is the site going down? Is the site losing data? Do you have a support team that is overwhelmed with user complaints? All those might contribute to saying, well, we really should start over. Although there's a caveat there, usually a rebuild is not a quick thing. So if you have serious production problems today, you probably need to at least mitigate those while you're rebuilding. Finally, and particularly for Django projects, because Django has an ecosystem of open source plugin projects that you can take advantage of that has been there since forever. You may have built your project and incorporated other things into it that solved particular problems. And over time, the people who maintain those projects and built those projects may have moved on to other things, and they may not be maintaining those projects anymore. And you may find that those projects are hindering you from keeping your code up to date because you can't update Django because they use older things. So you have to come to a decision of, do you want to keep using that? If so, do you adopt it? How do you keep that dependency from holding you back in updating your own code? And you can adopt, or you could find an alternative maybe that is healthier. If you have built your project around something large, like a whole CMS or an e-commerce site that has gone unmaintained, that may be a reason that you need to really think of a big refactor or a rebuild, because you probably don't want to take on writing your own CMS or maintaining a CMS. Maybe you do. I don't. So assuming you've just chosen that you're gonna continue to invest and nurture this code base. Now I'll start diving into how to do that. And here I have fallen back to kitty pictures. There's a mama nurturing her kittens. These happen to be kittens that I was fostering a few weeks ago. So I'll start with the prerequisites of what you absolutely positively have to do if you want to say you're nurturing your code base. And the first is to have a test suite that is good and automated. And you could have a whole talk on what makes a good test suite, but for my purposes for this talk, a good test suite is one that will give your developers confidence that when they make a change, they haven't broken something. And they can be confident that they can do that and it won't break anything in production. And it should also be one that continues to grow as you hit production problems or problems that are found by QA. Write a test case that would have covered that would have caught it, and make sure that you're expanding your test suite to cover cases where you've actually hit problems. And the second primary thing you absolutely positively have to do is get the code up to supported levels of the operating system, the deployment infrastructure, Django, all the dependencies, Python. You want to do that for the security fix reasons. You don't want to be in a situation where you're running an old level, Django comes out with a security fix, your code isn't covered, and you have to figure out, is your version of Django vulnerable, and if so, how you would fix it. You don't want to do that. Aside from that, though, there's benefits to updating and keeping current levels. One is that it's a good way to learn a code base, to do an upgrade, because you're going to hit issues and you're going to have to dive in and try and understand what was going on with the code. And the other thing is it's an opportunity, and it often forces you to freshen the code, because you'll be updating, and as you update, Django or Python will have deprecated certain things and certain older ways of doing things, so you're going to have to move your code onto the fresher, the newer way, and it will start to look a little less foreign to newer developers. So those are the prereqs of nurturing. Next, I'll talk about some easy wins. This is a kind of obscure picture of easy wins, probably. Kittens sometimes are hard to get them to eat solid food on their own, and these kittens were just easy. They saw mama's food one day and said, oh, that looks good, we're going to start eating it. So they were some easy wins in terms of growing up. For nurturing your code bases, some easy wins that have come up in the last few years, at least that I'm aware of, are two things: are pre-commit and black for code formatting and enforcing some consistency of style or import sorting or whatever it is that your team would like to be consistent in and have standardized across your code base. I worked on teams for years before we had this, and one section of the code was written in one format, another section was written in another format, and it could be hard to navigate between those two and to feel comfortable in both environments. So I find it very easy nowadays that black and pre-commit is there. We've pretty much, well, at Cactus, universally adopted them to help just bypass all religious wars about formatting, for instance. I also find it very helpful to have a linter embedded in my code editor that will, when I save the file, it says, this string interpolation you got here, you could use an F string. Or this set creation, you could use a set comprehension. So it sort of guides me in easy ways that I can freshen the code base and make it more modern looking. And if I have the time when I'm working on that particular file, I'll go ahead and do it, and it'll incrementally, as the files are touched, get the code to look more modern. That might be automatable. I haven't investigated that. So let's switch to thinking a little longer term and a little deeper about how to keep your code base nurtured. And this picture looked to me like something that would take some time to think about and to plan to create this garden sculpture. So that spoke to me in terms of how to nurture longer term. And here, my main goal here is to get to where coders, developers can understand the story of the code. And essentially, it's trying to get back to, you can never get back to the building phase where everyone had it in their head. But if the story of the code is accessible in tools around the code, then you can get sort of a glimmer of that building phase back. And it's helpful to know how to move forward if you can understand why the code is the way it is. And some of the things to think about are what you put in your commit messages. Of course, here I'm assuming you're using source code control, so that's an assumption. You're using source code control and you make a commit, and you don't just fire off a brief commit message saying, try this to fix it, but rather be a little more thoughtful about why this change is being made and focus more on the why, if possible, than like the what, because the what is always going to be accessible to someone later who comes and looks at the commit because they can see the code that was changed. Oftentimes, the commit message is not really where you want to put all the documentation around a change. Usually, you'd want to have a ticket tracker that is keeping track of your issues, keeping track of your new features, keeping track of the bugs, and there's a good place to have your bigger description of the why. So oftentimes, if a commit, if it references a tracker issue, would let you record enough information so that someone later on can figure out why this code is the way it is. Another aspect of keeping a code base nurtured is to include in the document, in the repo itself, some documentation around common things that the developers may hit over time. So sometimes it's hard to look up in an issue track or something like this, like a code base that's maintained over several years, and it's got some maintenance things that you do yearly, documenting those in the repo so that the next developer who does it next year knows how to do it, can do it. Or if there's common server issues that occur, and you can document how to solve them, how to get over things like a replica database going down. Having that in the code itself is helpful. So essentially, developing a culture of leaving clues for the future is essential, I think, to maintaining and nurturing a code base. It's a current investment. It may take a little longer to fully resolve a problem today, but then tomorrow, or actually more likely a few months from now, when you hit a problem, it would be easier for that person to solve it. I'm over time. Oh no, I have five minutes left. So there's one more picture of mama nursing kittens. In summary, legacy code, I feel like, has often a wealth of experience and knowledge sunk into it that is often underestimated. And unfamiliarity with the code can lead to a lot of fear and discomfort around changing it, but I think we can overcome that. There are modern tools that can reduce the friction of just old ways of doing things that can be automated up to more newer ways of doing things. And at longer term, a culture of valuing spending time recording why and valuing digging into the why and fully understanding a problem before considering a bug fixed is a good way to have a nurturing culture around your older code bases. So my final picture is what a nurtured legacy code base might look like. So it's an older building. It doesn't look scary. It looks kind of, well, it looks a little imposing, but doesn't look dark. And that's my talk. Thank you for listening.
So first of all, let me thank you for your talk with this.
Thank you.
Gift, yeah. And were there any questions from the audience? Oh, that was speedy.
Hey, I wanted to know, what's the oldest code base you've worked on?
What's the oldest code base? Huh. So I don't know how old some of the ones we've inherited are, but I'm currently working on one that we built starting in 2011 that we're still working on, and it's still in production. So at least a decade.
Cool. Thanks for the talk. Do you have any recommendations about maintaining a really nice commit history? I mean, like most successful code bases become legacy code bases at some point in time. So how can you maintain your history so that it is something that people can find the story in? I mean, like some people like to squash their branches when they merge. Some people don't. Some people
Yeah.
like to delete their branches. Some people don't. And there's all sorts of different like opinions about what your commits, like what information to put in your commits. So yeah, any words of wisdom on that?
That is not something I have not tried to enforce it. Let's do it this one particular way. Personally, I like to only make public a logical change. Like I don't make a lot of small commits, but within my team, I don't like to, if people are more comfortable making smaller commits, that's okay. So essentially, I would use the tools of the source code control to try and get back to the source. I do often please put a reference to the ticket you changed it for in there. But it is hard because people do have different styles of thinking. And with a little more effort, we could probably get a little more regular about, okay, have a merge commit or, rebase or do that. But I have not, it's not something I've been willing to tackle as a team-wide thing for myself.
All right. Any more questions from the audience? Oh,
Okay, thank you. Good talk. I have a question about sometimes when you're working on a legacy code base, one of the problems is it depends on a library that's now abandoned. Now, sometimes when you get to that years later, someone's picked it up or there's multiple successors, but it can be a complicated decision. Do I want to try to make my own version or wait for someone else to do that? Do you have any advice on that?
I've seen that too, where something has gone unmaintained and other people have picked it up. So I usually try to find the one that's farthest along and see if it meets my needs. Maybe I can switch over to it. It just takes sort of investigating what the status is of all the various forks that may have been created as a result of the original one going unmaintained. I don't think there's any straightforward, easy answer. But I have run across that, like, oh, this one actually got all the way up to this level, and I just need to go one further. So I usually start with the one that seems to be the most farthest ahead that I can find.
all right. I think we had one other question. Oh,
Hi, my question is, how would you deal with maybe not just legacy code, but maybe resistance from legacy ways of doing things within the team? And if there's any like low-hanging fruit to convince other people to nurture code?
I didn't quite catch the end of that.
Maybe if there's any like low-hanging fruit to convince teammates to adopt a nurturing code.
Usually it's just like encouraging, starting small, like let's do this newer thing in a newer style, and then in a newer, just try to start taking steps to do things in more modern ways and then incrementally do it. That's my preference. Some people might not like having a lot of disparity and differences in code bases, but I think working piece by piece in smaller chunks and incrementally improving would be the way I would go.
all right. Well, excellent. Let's give Karen one final round of applause.
Thank you.